All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And hello, all. We're excited that you are here. I'm actually looking to see if Albert has tweeted today. Have you done it, sir? Have you tweeted that we're on the air?
I am finalizing the tweet right now.
I can't hear you. You're going to do it right now? Is that what you said?
Yeah. He's
You're just in the middle of
tweet.
tweeting?
Yeah.
I just caught you right at the... Hey, I'll tell you what. We just loaded it onto the truck. I can see it leaving right now, the delivery. Yeah. You'll have it at your house in a matter of days.
Albert, thank you.
All right, thank you. Kim is here as well. Kim does a lot of work behind the scenes. You don't always see the work that Kim does, but she's very helpful behind the scenes.
Can you let him finish? Sir?
Yeah, let me finish. She hasn't done a lot of work behind the scenes on this particular show, but there are other shows where she does do a lot of work.
I blame you.
Yeah,
You're
it might
really
be
a
my
behind-the-scenes kind of girl.
It might be my fault. We are excited to have my boyfriend and favorite Britisher joining us off the top from the Meidas Touch Network. Anthony Davis will be here in just a minute. David Katz, the former federal prosecutor, will do a couple of things that aren't related to Donald Trump. I know there's been a lot of court stuff on Donald Trump in past conversations, but we have a lot that has to do with things other than Trump we'll speak with him with. And I also have, if we get to it, a That's Rich segment. We like to track sort of the bigger movement of money. Yes, we will talk about the increasing pressure on Joe Biden to step back and let the race take on a different top-of-ticket candidate. We'll speak about that, obviously, with Anthony Davis, and we will talk about it with you. And I also want to do something which I feel has been a bit orphaned in all the conversations as there's sort of this celebration of J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is, you can call him the American dream, you know, this hillbilly elegy stuff is a great story, but he really is a story of how he was propped up and gifted a life by super wealthy people like Peter Thiel. And he comes out of, I told you this a little bit yesterday, he's a venture capitalist. The idea somehow, and he's not even a successful venture capitalist. He got into that world through Thiel and out of Yale. And I'll just button it out for now, and then I'll get to Anthony, by saying he is, in a way, Trumpian in that it is all show and no go. If you actually look at his track record of success, it's fairly poor, apart from the fact that, as I say, he was gifted various positions. In fact, you could argue his position in Congress was gifted to him because Thiel dumped a bunch of money into his campaign. So I think there's way more you need to know about J.D. Vance. And, of course, his policies are scary, and they truly move that Trump world into Project 2025 in a huge, huge way. And that process has already begun.
You know what I'm curious about with him is that moment that he went from a never Trumper to a Trumper. Like, what happened? What was the thought process? What had to change within him to get him from one place to the other?
Yeah, we can talk to Anthony Davis about that. I would respectfully suggest that it was a bit of political expediency. You know, he knew that this is the way the wind is blowing, you know, and I think he came at it perhaps from that direction. But anyway, we'll get into that. Smash the like button like a boss if you would. Hit the thumbs up for us. We're just beginning. We're a live 2-hour show. We'll be on for 2 hours and then breakout videos and that sort of thing. And you can hit the notification bell and know whenever there is a new video released. We just passed 36,000 subscribers.
Woo-hoo!
And this is a small show, so it's really kind of cool that we've been able to build that audience through you, through sharing the show the way you do across Facebook and across social media, and the way you supported the show, honestly, with your money. So if you're a Patreon or PayPal subscriber, or if you hit us with super stickers, super chats, or a little love after the show goes off and you watch a video and you like it, that matters, and you're really the thing that sustains us. So Mark Thompson and Anthony Davis, best voices out there. I could listen to them read farm reports. All right. Without any further delay.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I love him. He is my favorite Britisher, and he is the king of the Meidas Touch network. I know he's not really the king, and he hasn't, but I give him that title. He of the 5-minute news. How about it for the great Anthony Davis, everyone? God damn it, stand up. God damn it, stand up for Anthony Davis. All right. Thank you. Sorry, Anthony. There were a few people who were slow to get to their feet.
It's fine.
To be fair, they're senior citizens, so it's a little harder for them to rise quickly. How's the 5-minute news going, first of all? I wanted to ask you about that before we get into everything going on in America.
It's a very good question. It has actually blown up in the last 2 weeks to a point that I can't really believe it. So I'm now putting out, because obviously we're in this last few months up to the election day. What is it, like 109 days or something now?
Yeah.
So I'm putting out an explainer video every day of strategy and thoughts, and people seem to be very receptive to it. I was a little shy at first to kind of show my face and my opinion, but now I've kind of found the confidence, courtesy of YouTube comments and people writing to me. It's made it a lot easier. I'm not a natural in front of the camera. I like to hide behind the microphone normally, and so it's very heartwarming to know that, as you have here with your show, that there are people who are actually waiting to listen to what you have to say.
Yeah, it's a terrific community that you discover. That's at least been my discovery. Well, I'm a big fan, and I'm just loving your work, and so glad that you can spend a couple of minutes with us regularly. And so now I want to ask you about what's happening. First, before I get to the RNC, and as I was mentioning prior to you coming on, I was talking about J.D. Vance, and you can talk about Trump and Vance and that entire plan they have and strategy they have. I think they're feeling very good about their chances of winning. That's one of the reasons that Vance ended up on the ticket to begin with. I mean, Trump clearly feels as though he doesn't need to put anybody on the ticket to win a state or to gain any kind of political. So we'll get to that in a second. But I want to talk about the crisis that's affecting the Democrats right now. Speak to what's going on with Biden.
Well, this morning we've heard that he is now at least open to talking about the idea of stepping aside, and he's been asking for Kamala Harris's polling numbers. Well, that is a huge shift, because last week he was like, leave me alone. Maybe getting COVID changed him, and he was like, I'm done with this, because, I had COVID for 10 days recently and I couldn't move. So, I think it would be funny if COVID would be the thing that stops Biden from being on the ticket. But I have a strategy for them, which I'm not going to say on your show, because I only just made a video about it 10 minutes ago, and I just put it on the 5-minute news channel.
Okay.
So I'd love people to go see it there. But my position is this. I think that he needs to stay where he is. I think that the thing that people are missing is that independents and fiscal conservatives and traditional conservatives will vote for Joe Biden. They will vote for him because he's an old white guy and he's seen as a moderate and not as a progressive. And those votes are essential to win this election. You don't want those people who are never Trumpers, who don't want to vote for Donald Trump, voting for third party or not at all. You got to get the votes, because as we know, the Electoral College is rigged, and we just need everybody to kind of come out on polling day and do their citizen duty.
This is interesting. Josh is saying, sorry to interrupt, but he's saying he's been bullied, Biden has been, by the corporate media. Do you agree with that?
That's actually what I said in this video, yeah. I was like, the corporate media, isn't it funny how people, especially Republicans, have always criticized the media as being liberal and being run by liberals? But actually now, especially with the change in ownership of CNN and other publications, that most of the media now is pretty much in Republican ownership. And so, they don't want Biden to win. All of the coverage of Biden has been negative, despite the fact the country's doing really well. Wall Street had its best week last week. Inflation is coming down. Jobs numbers are great. It doesn't make any sense And so there is a targeted campaign to make Joe Biden look like he is too old and too decrepit. And the reality is that he had a bad night on that debate. He'd done too much international travel. They'd over-prepped him. And also he has a stutter. And I wish people would take more of an interest in the stutter, because it is the thing that holds him back. And, you know, if you have a stutter, when you are under pressure, i.e. in a TV studio or that kind of environment, especially when you've been told, okay, you've got 1 minute and you need to tell us with the clock, and you've got Trump standing next to you who pays no attention to the mic being on or off. He just steamrolled through the whole thing, putting Biden off. What chance does an 81-year-old man have with a speech impediment under that much pressure in winning the debate? It's just not possible. You cannot debate Donald Trump. Hillary couldn't do it. It is an impossible task.
But let me just push back a little bit and say, well, he did do it, actually. The last time he ran against Trump, he did it, and he did it much more effectively. He did seem, Anthony, you must concede, to have checked out. He seemed lost. He did seem, it was more than just a stutter. Come on. He really, sadly, did display some sort of diminishment of his mental acuity.
Well, he's 4 years older. And the thing is, as you get older, those years can be unkind. So, I agree with that. But, he, the next day, did a rally with more energy and more strength than I've ever seen. And since he's done 25 public events that the media refuses to cover, Donald Trump's just either been golfing or playing shoot my ear. So it's a very kind of two very different candidates. Trump's in it for himself. Biden's a public servant. Which one do you want? Dictatorship or democracy? It doesn't really matter who the candidate is. I mean, I've seen people saying they'll vote for Joe Biden even if he's lying in a box.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've said on this show many times. I'll take him on a hospital gurney before I vote for Trump, of course. But I wonder, I mean, you can apply that logic to him stepping back and putting Kamala Harris top of ticket, or whomever, because, as you say, there's such a strong no vote. But I feel the Democrats are in hanging on to Biden, and it may be that Biden could prevail, although all the current polling would suggest otherwise. But the idea somehow that Trump will drown himself because of his negatives, because of who he is, because of the toxicity of taking away women's reproductive rights, because there is just so much wrong with everything from a policy standpoint that Trump speaks to and that J.D. Vance would speak to. I don't know if he's going to drown himself. It looks as though the only thing I would say, and then I'll shut up, is that his ceiling seems real, the Trump ceiling. I mean, I know his base is super real, but also his ceiling seems real. Like he can't really punch through. Biden's feels like it might also be real. I don't know, but I'm just saying, I think there's a limit to how much altitude the Trump ticket can get.
I would agree. And I present an alternative but similar argument, and that is that Donald Trump is not popular. He is not a popular candidate. He is popular with a cult base who buy the merchandise, and because they're all wearing red hats and now little bandages on their right ears, they look like there is more energy. It feels like there's more energy. And the timing of the RNC coming 2 days after an attempted assassination puts Donald Trump on the front pages of all the newspapers, then the announcement of J.D. Vance, of course. So suddenly it's like, well, it's all Trump, 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 Trump. Everyone's talking about Trump. But it's temporary, Donald Trump is divisive. He's the kind of person who I think is being legitimized by the media because they have a vested interest. But when it comes to voters, and you really have to trust the American people to have instinct for what is the right thing to do, his cards are on the table about being a dictator and an autocrat. Finally, people are talking about Project 2025 in detail. They recognize, especially after the immunity case being ratified in the Supreme Court, giving Trump immunity. Are you kidding me? Then the classified documents case being thrown out by Judge Eileen Cannon. These things are examples of what a Donald Trump presidency will look like, where there is he's He's a despot. And everybody around him, both in the judiciary, in Congress, they'll all be sycophants. And I don't think that the American people want that. And so with that in mind, I think Donald Trump's narcissism has tricked him into thinking that he is as popular as he is wherever he goes. Because, of course, wherever he goes, they always make sure there's people there. They pay them. They bring in, like 3 black Republicans and stand them there in Chick-fil-A. It's terrible. The reality is Trump is not popular.
By the way, that's not a joke. There are black Republicans who are paid by the Trump people to show up at different events. So that might have sounded like sort of a glancing, cheeky remark.
No, the woman in Chick-fil-A turned out to be she's an organizer for the Republican National Committee. And she brought all of her friends in as well. And then he's like, I'm buying milkshakes for everyone. And he bought like 6 milkshakes and there was like 50 people. And I just was like, this is... we exposed it. On Meidas Touch, we kind of found who this woman was, and we're like, this is where she's been working, and she appeared at another of his things last week as well. So, it's a confidence trick, Mark. The whole Donald Trump movement is a confidence trick. The media are falling for it. Sadly, a lot of the public, the public are falling for it. Adam Schiff is falling for it. I just don't think people understand that the base, the Republican base, is not all Republicans. It's what, 30%, 40% of Republicans love Trump and think Trump's great? The rest are embarrassed about him. Yeah,
it's that's an interesting perspective. It's funny. I first of all, a couple of things. Chad says that he just subscribed to the 5-Minute News last night, so congratulations on that, another subscriber. Damn it, that was not a speech impediment. He didn't stutter when he was conquering Medicare or when he was proclaiming the virtues of VP Trump. That was all very clear. He looked lost, says Luis. This is what we were talking about on the debate stage. It's,
But two things can be correct, right? It's not one thing. It's his stutter. It's his age, or it can be multiple things. He's human. He's fallible. Why do people think that a president can't fall off his bike? Everybody falls off their bike. Yet when Joe Biden does it, there's something wrong with him. Yeah, he fell off his bike. At least he gets on a bike. Trump can't get on a bike. Yeah. So,
but you can't fall off your bike on a debate stage the way he fell off his bike that night.
And he admits that. And he says, I had a really bad night. He said, I screwed up. It's my fault. And the guy was exhausted, and I think, resting him look, Trump's resting all the time, doesn't do anything,
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean,
still doesn't make any sense.
He's on the golf course or in a bathrobe. But here's something from Cindy. She says there was an internal polling leak that shows a 15-point lead by Trump. I didn't see a 15-point lead. The most I saw was 8 points. But nonetheless, Anthony Davis, have you seen anything that would suggest that there is a serious edge that Trump has, such that they may want to recalibrate what they do just from a strategic standpoint on the Democratic side?
No, because the polls, I don't buy the polls. I've got a lot into how the polls are created, and we know it's like landlines with older people, and a lot of people just don't respond to polls, and so a lot of the polling companies are in the pockets of the Republican Party as well. So I'm not really interested in polls. Mine is more of a sense of the national conversation, the feeling. I don't think that you can't pretend that Joe Biden is Superman. He isn't. But he's a good person who has demonstrated that he can do the job because he is the president now. And the country's doing really well. So it doesn't make sense to me that people are like, he can't do it. And I'm like, he's doing it now. So that's the proof. And that's the difference between these two candidates. One is capable of being the president despite being old because he delegates, he has a good vice president, he has an amazing cabinet of young, diverse, energized people, and so he is the delegator. The dictator, in contrast, doesn't let anyone do anything. It's Trump's way or the highway. Well, that's authoritarianism.
Here's one from PT. There is a prejudice against stutterers and old people. Trump has screwed up just as much, and he tells lie after lie, and the press mostly gives him a pass.
Yes.
That's essentially what you're saying.
Well, Biden did push back in Lester Holt's interview on NBC and said, "Why are you asking me about the debate? I had a bad night. Why have you not mentioned that Donald Trump lied 28 times?" And Lester Holt couldn't answer him because, those legacy media networks, tragically, are all batting for Donald Trump. The idea that democracy could fall in America doesn't seem to be of interest to them. It's so short-sighted.
The word from Lori, unfortunately, just as Dems will vote for Biden administration, people hating Biden policies are voting for Trump administration and not Trump the man. They can dislike and vote for the purported policies. This is where I think there's some truth to these wedge issues that are cultural. Anthony, I mean, they get a lot of air on trans rights and these latest, the latest law in California where, essentially a trans youth can express the questions around sexuality and around sexual identity and not have to ever have the school tell the parents that they make hay of these kinds of cultural issues.
I think that the cultural stuff, as in, is America a racist country, which is a big part of this, right? Putting Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket. Are people going to vote, A, for a woman of color, but B, a female? And when I've talked about this, people are like, "Oh, no, I don't think America's ready for a female president." I'm like, wow, we did it in the UK in 1979, done it twice since, having female leaders. Germany had its most successful period with a female leader. Look at New Zealand. Look at these countries that have trailblazed with women in charge. So yes, it's totally the right time for a female leader, but you do have to consider the cultural issues, which is America ready for a black person and a female person? I just can't believe we're having to have this conversation in 2024.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's incredible. But this country is, and this has been something that I keep coming back around to. I think that the country is deeply racist with it's baked into the culture, and there is a misogyny. I mean, simply look at the Supreme Court decision. They've reversed Roe, the celebration of taking away women's reproductive freedoms. It's despicable. It's absolutely despicable. And as you say, in 2024, we're doing this? I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we're devolving while the rest of the world is evolving. So I then would put the question out, can Kamala Harris, if this train that seems to have achieved sort of what is that, tipping point speed, if this train to essentially railroad Biden out and Kamala in, if that's successful, can Kamala win? For all the reasons that you just mentioned, which is, people are afraid of the fascism that's rising. They want to embrace the competence of the Democrats, whatever it might be. Might that carry with Kamala or not?
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you what I said in my video because I can't really answer your question without giving it away.
People will still go to your videos.
I know they will. It's
okay.
Fine. It's just I was so excited about it when I made it this morning, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be great." My suggestion.
Hold on a second. Take the banner off with the www.youtube. Just say 5-minute news on YouTube. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No one's copying the URL.
This is my suggestion for strategy. So currently we have a Biden-Harris ticket, and what I'm suggesting is a Harris-Biden ticket.
Oh, that's interesting.
No one's thought of it.
Yeah.
No one's thought of it because then you keep Joe Biden. You keep him. So the people that the Republicans who want Biden, they still get their Biden because they trust him. He's, an elder statesman. He's been around a long time. They know that he's a safe pair of hands. And then we get to smash the glass ceiling by having a female president and a president of color. And, I think it could be as exciting as it was when Hillary Clinton was about to win the election and James Comey made a speech about her email investigation. And scuppered that concept. But do you remember how exciting it was for the whole country, women and girls getting a sense that for the first time, females would be represented at the very top of government? It was a very great feeling that got scuppered by a snake oil salesman from Queens.
Right. Right. Very well put. Many agree with you in the chat. It's also suggested that, there seems to be an inherent weakness with the very short time that Kamala Harris was in the race against Joe Biden. People point to Iowa and people point to just her
I don't think that
bad
matters.
polling numbers.
The thing is, if she was at the top of the ticket, it takes the pressure off him for these environments that he's not natural in, like the TV studio with the time clock and the pressure and all of that stuff. But it means that he is still there as part of this duo, this dynamic duo. And I genuinely think that if it's a Harris-Biden ticket, they can smash it. If it's a Biden-Harris ticket, then they'll still win, in my view, because I think that all the excitement about Donald Trump is temporary because of obviously the drama of the assassination, but in reality, he is not popular.
I would say this, and then I want to share a comment with you that just came in because it reflects some recent polling, and it's an alternative to what we've just suggested. There's a practical consideration to vice president. If something happens to the president, the vice president is to ascend to the seat of power. The problem could come in the fact that Biden may not be, positioned to do that. I mean, he is advancing in age, it would seem, in ways that may diminish his ability to, remain in a position of authority. If he couldn't serve, I believe third in line would be Speaker of the House, right?
But not if there's an election, because if there's an election, do we not get a change of speaker?
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, you could get it. Sure.
So from that perspective, it's not a problem.
Yeah, if Democrats retain control of the House, it's not a problem.
Yeah,
right. If they don't, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
Here is something, and then I'll let you go. Mark Kelly. This is from Pietro because this is interesting. Mark Kelly as VP is a very strong look. He checks every single box. And here's what I would say about that comment from Pietro. If you look at the polling, Mark Kelly actually polls ahead of Kamala Harris in terms of popularity. So there are alternatives. I mean, actually, if you must know, there are 3 or 4 people who poll ahead of Kamala Harris in the most recent polling.
But is it too late, Mark? That's the thing, because you have to look at the fact that there's only 100 days, and people don't like change, and I'm very aware of that kind of sense of familiarity and people that they know, and if you bring in candidates that are brand new, it might be too shocking. So you could do it with Kamala Harris at the top, and then another person, as VP. But I think that to put someone at the top of the ticket at this stage would be foolish.
Mark should be top of ticket. I think you mean Mark Kelly, right?
Yeah. He definitely means Mark Kelly.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
How dare you? How dare you? Anthony Davis, the 5-Minute News. I love everything you do there at the Meidas Touch Network, and I love when you come visit us. There it is, 5-Minute News. Check it out. It's right here on our home platform of YouTube, and there's great stuff always. Come visit again, my friend, and I look forward to the next time.
Thank you. I'll vote for you, Mark.
All right. Anthony Davis, everybody. Thank you. Yeah, I love it. All right. It doesn't do you any. He's left now. It doesn't do it. You can sit. No, you don't. No. All right. I don't agree with everything he says, but boy, I love the way he says it.
I sure do too.
That British thing he does is just great.
I don't think people would be more apt to vote for Kamala Harris if President Biden was back in the vice presidential slot, because she'd still be running the country. So if you're a misogynist or a racist, you're still not going to vote for her, whether he's sitting, second fiddle on the ticket or not.
Yeah, it's interesting because the misogynist, racist people you're never going to get.
No.
Because if Kamala Harris is anywhere near it. His notion is interesting for the idea that there are enough people who want Broadway Joe to stay, that you would, in a sense, mollify that group of people. Mollify is a ding word. The idea somehow that you could handle the call for Biden by keeping him on the ticket is really an inventive one. I think as a practical matter, it doesn't make sense. I think it's also a cleaner, more politically palatable thing for Biden to step back. I think it's going to be it's really a hard ask already, you can tell. I mean, everyone has visited Joe Biden, from Nancy Pelosi to Chuck Schumer to George Clooney via column to all of these big money donors. I mean, the only people who haven't visited Joe Biden and told him to step back are like the ghosts of presidencies past. You know what I mean? I mean, they've come to him like they did that night in whatever that Dickens play was.
A Christmas Carol?
The Christmas Carol, thank you. Like, Joe, look at what would happen if you stay in the race. These various awful things will happen.
Yeah.
You lose. The Democrats lose. They lose the House. They lose the Senate. Oh, my God. Oh, and look over here. The Supreme Court puts in even more strict restrictions on women and minorities. And then look at this, Joe. The deportations begin, and inflation takes off because of the tariffs. I feel like that's the place that Joe Biden is in, a really tough spot where he's been visited by everyone. The scenarios are bleak, and they're trying to give him what is a politically palatable way to step back. COVID, actually, and his contracting COVID gives him at least an excuse medically, because he's pointed to the fact that if there was a medical reason, he might step back. This gives him a medical reason to pivot and leave the race.
Yeah,
but that said, back to the idea, I think if he were to leave, he would step back from the ticket completely. And so as a practical matter, I guess I don't accept Anthony Davis's hypothetical or strategy or suggestion that Biden then be number 2 on the ticket. I just see it as something that he wouldn't go for, and I'm not so sure it would be effective anyway, but I don't see him doing it. But this is a key week. And I'm glad we covered the fact that there is a feeding frenzy around the media and this. I mean, this is clearly something that has been animated in part by the media, the way they dogged Hillary Clinton about the emails. All you heard about was the emails. Here's this guy who is a verifiable con man, 4 bankruptcies, and the history replete with evidence of him stiffing contractors and sexually harassing women. I mean, this is a guy who was, even by his own words, kind of this loathsome, predatory dude. And the media, all they could talk about was Hillary's emails. It was the clickbait of the last 10 days to 2 weeks of the campaign. And I think there is an aspect of that around Joe Biden. That's not to say when these issues come up and when Biden has such an awful night as he did with the debate, and then as he's labored in speech and labored in thought, these things become amplified and these questions become legitimate. So it's not to say those aren't legitimate, but you really do see the media feeding frenzy, because Trump has a rough time also, a very rough time, and he's old. Trump's pushing 80, and yet all we hear about is Biden. So, but that doesn't change the fact that money's gone away, and Pelosi has now spoken to him. You had Schiff, who is tight with Pelosi. She's basically speaking through Schiff. Schumer, top Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries. It's a lot of pressure. I'm not optimistic about Kamala Harris's chances. I'm just not. I mean, in the latest polling, she doesn't show up well. I'm sorry. I mean, there's this sense that, well, she has the same chance that Biden does. That's not even clear. Blue Labs carried out research to figure out who would increase the number of people voting for Democrats in 7 battleground states: Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Interviewed more than 15,000 voters across those states. This is it's the 18th today. They concluded it 6 days ago. The results published in a draft show all of the alternative candidates ahead of Biden, including Harris. The four who performed best, outpacing Biden by roughly 5 points, were, and this is why I mentioned him just moments ago with Anthony Davis, Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, Maryland Governor Wes Moore, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. They all performed best, outpacing Biden by roughly 5 points. Those who participated in the poll were randomly assigned 11 options for president, including Biden. And on average, alternate Democratic candidates were ahead of Biden by 3 points. But Kamala Harris's results were below all of those. Everyone I just mentioned, she underperforms all of them. Voters are looking for a fresh face, the study said in its findings. Those more closely tied to the current administration perform relatively worse than other tested candidates. Now let me just step back and go, I don't really know why. This has been a successful administration. They just relieved, now again, you may not be for this, but I'm sure Kim will have it in her news. They just relieved a bunch of student debt. I mean, he's passed this transformative infrastructure package. Did it have everything I wanted it to have? No, but I'm a tree hugger. I want a bunch of stuff. I want aggressive environmental policies. So
He did it with Republicans fighting against him and still knows enough about the way things work and where the bodies are buried that he managed to get the things that were important to the country through.
Yeah. I mean, I see the effectiveness of this administration. So it's odd that, like, anything about this administration is sort of things that voters don't spark to. And they're looking for a fresh face. And I'm just seeing this. People are pissed, Mark. Yeah, I agree. People are pissed. People feel left out of a lot of the good times right now. I mean, the stock markets are at all-time highs. I think people feel left out of that. Also, interest rates are high. So you're in a tough spot as a younger voter. It feels as though the idea of you owning the place you live is a fading dream. Anyway, it's interesting to me because if you look at polling, Kamala doesn't do well. So I know there's this call, Kamala, Kamala, Kamala. I also don't have any answers. I mean, Biden's not doing well. So, you kind of pick your poison here, and it's very possible if you can get somebody on the stump who can better articulate Project 2025 and the express train to fascism and despotism that is coming down the tracks, the dismantling of the American government, the dismantling of those institutions designed to represent the will of the people. That is what's coming.
I thought Kamala Harris was the only choice because of the campaign financing.
I think that's a great argument. I mean, it's a great argument for her because she is the only one who has access to that money, and it's not an insubstantial amount of money. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. And you do need money to drive campaigns. You need money for staff. You need money for media buys. You need money for so many things. So you have to go from zero. Let's say your choice would be Mark Kelly, okay? You have to go from zero, no apparatus set up essentially, to super powered up, and you have to do it in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Not impossible, but it's a big mountain to climb. Anyway, that's a little bit of the latest polling, and it's not favorable to Kamala Harris, but maybe you could say it's early. I want to get into J.D. Vance and how he got into power, how he ends up with Donald Trump, top of ticket. It's crazy. His real story, beyond hillbilly elegy, is a remarkable one. Also, you'll never believe who's going to speak at the RNC. I'm talking about besides Trump. You'll never believe who's going to speak. I'll tell you about that as we continue as well. Smash the like button if you would. Give us the thumbs up. It is free. Appreciate all the support, all the love, all the ways you share the show. And Kim's News, and we continue. I'll mention, by the way, last thing, the former federal prosecutor, David Katz, the great analyst used worldwide across the English-speaking world by media worldwide. He's a regular here on Thursdays. He'll be along as we kick off the second hour. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. The anxiety is among Democrats about President Biden's campaign growing by the day. The Washington Post reports former President Obama told his allies President Biden needs to seriously consider the viability of his candidacy. Meanwhile, Axios reports that President Biden may be persuaded now by Democratic Party leaders and close friends to drop out of the race by this weekend. The Republican National Convention is underway and reaches its peak tonight with a speech by presidential nominee Donald Trump. The week has been unlike any other in convention history, started right after the assassination attempt of Trump. It included the naming of J.D. Vance of Ohio as his running mate and a massive security presence throughout the Milwaukee area. President Biden is announcing another round of student debt forgiveness. I have a picture. Cancel student debt. Look at them there. They
don't look too happy.
No, I think they want more money because, student debt will wipe you out.
Yeah, it's weird that the young people are not sparking to, Grandpa's the guy who's relieving your student debt, guys. Donald Trump and that crew on the right, they're not going to, A, relieve your student debt, and B, they're certainly supportive of predatory lending practices which exist around student debt. So I'm just saying, I know everybody hates Grandpa. He's too old, but Grandpa's the guy who's relieving your student debt.
Well, this time around, it's $1.2 billion in relief for public sector workers like teachers, nurses, and firefighters. Borrowers can qualify through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Meantime, Republicans are leading legal challenges to the administration's earlier debt forgiveness efforts. So President Biden trying to get student debt wiped out and being fought at every turn, and people aren't talking about that as much. More Americans than expected are seeking unemployment benefits, unfortunately. The Labor Department says it received 243,000 initial requests for the week ending July 13th. It's up from the previous week's revised total of 223,000 and more than the 229,000 that most analysts were expecting today. We talked about this on the show earlier, but now the lawyer for former Broncos player Terrell Davis says United Airlines' apology to the NFL Hall of Famer is not enough. Davis was taken off a flight from Denver to California in handcuffs last week after an incident with a flight attendant. United apologized to the athlete and said it removed the flight attendant from duty while they closely review the matter. His attorney says legal action is now being considered.
I don't blame him, and we noted this in the story. He didn't really have like an altercation with the flight attendant. He was just asking for some ice, and he reached out. And again, this is corroborated on some level by other people around. The great thing about a plane is it's not like you're not in a dark alley somewhere. Other people witnessed what went on. And he touched but he didn't, apparently he touched very lightly, like on the elbow.
Like a tap.
The flight attendant, and the flight attendant reacted insanely hostilely. Now, I'm on the side of flight attendants, and I understand why they're wound pretty tight, because I think now this is a bizarre world on these planes now. I mean, there are these crazies who want to make a show. It's almost like a dinner theater thing where they don't want to wear a mask, or they don't want to wear a seatbelt, or they don't want to wait for the bathroom, or whatever the hell the thing is. It turns into a big thing, and all of a sudden flight attendants are like nightclub bouncers. So I understand why they are wound tight. But by the same token, dude, you can't overreact to something like that. And they take this guy away in cuffs, Terrell Davis. Please. I think the lawyer is actually right. I'm on Terrell Davis's side. They're going to have to cut, if not a check, some kind of big voucher to allow him to travel on United for, for free, essentially, for a while.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that what happened to him is fair. And an apology, he says it's not enough. So, University of California is doing something about speech. They have a final vote coming today on a new policy, a speech policy for University of California employees. The Board of Regents is expected to approve restricting personal and political statements. So employees would no longer be allowed on campus homepages, but they could be posted on secondary pages, different opinions, with a disclaimer saying they don't represent the University of California's official stance. Teachers could still share views on their own faculty web pages and on social media. So restricting a personal speech on public pages? The state is boosting apprenticeships to help young people kickstart their career. There are 51 projects being funded across California to give those between the ages of 16 and 24 years old more opportunities. This includes young parents, former foster kids, students in communities with high poverty. Employers will be supported and encouraged to hire young workers in industries like healthcare, education, public sector, and transportation as well. The state of California is the first to officially launch a hydrogen hub. Arches signed an agreement with the Department of Energy and secured the first round of funding. This hydrogen hub will create a network of clean, renewable hydrogen production sites to cut fossil fuel use throughout the state. It's been a big holdback for hydrogen fuel vehicles because there are not enough stations or places to get the hydrogen fuel. Governor Gavin Newsom says this will power ports and public transportation, getting people and goods where they need to go without local air pollution. Salesforce is soon requiring all employees to return to the office for at least 3 days a week now, and San Francisco leaders seem to be pretty excited about it. The Salesforce Tower in the downtown area once housed more employees than any other building in the city. Officials expect the influx of workers to be a boom for the local economy. However, commercial real estate experts point out the downtown area still has a vacancy rate nearing 37%. Salesforce has laid off more than 3,000 employees in recent months, so the positive effect on the city of San Francisco might be negligible. Lastly, a Bay Area city is using a new tactic to scare off geese. The birds have taken over fields where the San Jose State University football team practices, leaving a lot of droppings behind, as they do. In fact, staff members were spending 2 hours picking it all up. So the assistant athletic director came up with the solution: plastic coyotes. He put 4 of them up, and now the field is cleaner. Players say they're no longer worried about falling in all the scat, so they have to just run around the plastic coyotes. Look at that.
Wow.
Solutions.
Yeah, it was always there in plastic.
This report, exactly, is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. It is a place to get a little bit of heaven in your cup. Yeah, you can find a huge selection of coffees and amazing teas. Today I have the hibiscus iced tea in the cup.
Oh, yes, for a hot day.
Yeah, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, and make sure that you get your exclusive 10% discount by putting Mark T all together in the little box where you enter your code, and you get 10% off just for being a Mark Thompson Show listener.
Yes, I'm going to have a little cup right now.
What do you have in the cup today, sir?
I have dark, rich espresso.
Nice.
As dark and rich as a political donor. I love it. It's delicious. Delicioso, as I say in my country. Thank you.
I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now, he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson.
Smash it with your iron rod.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Listen to me. I don't want to hear you.
This is Mark Thompson.
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
Morning.
That's not fake. That's real.
It's fantastic.
Put that coffee down.
There's never been anything like this.
We've never seen anything like it before.
Nobody has ever put something like this together that I've ever seen.
I blame you.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
There is nothing in our history that quite compares to this.
And this is their new hoax.
Big shout out.
Receive the rod of equity and mercy.
I did everything right and they indicted me.
Smash it with your iron rod.
I misspoke. My bad. I'm sorry.
I don't think you should apologize for how you feel.
Did you really just do that?
What up, everybody? It's our Thursday show. We are live 2 hours a day, every day, Monday through Friday. And then we chop it up and drop little segments and videos if there's something that you missed. And hopefully you get a chance to see those as well. So subscribe and hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a video. We don't really drop a ton of stuff, so we won't be constantly bothering you, but we will let you know when there is a new video out. I've got David Katz, the renowned federal prosecutor, now turned defense lawyer, who's joining after the top of the hour, and he'll kick off our second hour. I wanted to spend a second. Oh, let me get to some comments, and then I'll spend a second in a couple of ways. We've got some comments.
I've received a lot of positive letters.
And here they are. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Romania Animal Rescue, Inc. A big shout out.
Big shout out.
Romania Animal Rescue, Inc. They are regular viewers and supporters of the show. They threw us a 20, I think the last time. They throw us a 20 this time with a super sticker. Check them out. Romania Animal Rescue, Inc. Maybe there's something there in that world on their website that you will want to be part of or want to support in some way. So, and really appreciate them being so regularly supportive of the show. Also, a big shout out to Kelly Malloy.
Big shout out.
Big shout out, Kelly. Another regular viewer and supporter. Thank you, Kelly. So appreciate you. And now to some of these comments. This was, no one forced them to go to. Oh, I see. This is about student debt forgiveness. My wife and I earned degrees that are both worth something in this world. I paid in full. I want my money back, says Champagne Wishes. I'm sympathetic and understanding of that position. There is a considerable number of people that feel as though, hey, we paid our student loan back, or we've been paying it back for some time, and all of a sudden these guys step forward and they get debt relief. I can't disabuse you of that feeling. All I can say is at some point, programs begin that benefit a group of people, and you didn't benefit from that program. I'll give you an example. Social Security. When Social Security started, it benefited all of these Americans, and many of the Americans who came before them didn't ever get Social Security, didn't ever have the government essentially lifting them up and supporting them financially. There are a number of loan programs that the federal government offers, and they offer them now, and they didn't offer them 20 years ago. And you built your life without those programs. Now people are building their lives with those programs. The VA bill, for example. I mean, there are all these ways in which others may benefit from programs that are just beginning. And you never had the chance. So I get it. I understand why you can feel that way. But for those who are withering under tremendous debt, I think it is fair to try to find some way to provide relief. And the last thing I would say is the cost of higher education in this country is scandalous. It is absolutely scandalous. If you look at the way in which the price tag for higher education has risen, it corresponds to nothing. It corresponds to no cost of living increase. It corresponds to no kind of expenditure that universities need to make. In other words, there's no justification for the insane numbers that are associated with higher education in America. It's obscene. And so against that backdrop, some kind of relief does make sense. That's about the best I can do to make you people who took those loans and feel, in a sense, betrayed, feel a bit better. And I don't know that that's going to do it. Here's Mars. I took loans and couldn't get classes needed due to
impaction
and priority for foreign students paying more. Where's my debt relief? That's a thing. People who pay full fare, essentially, and those are the foreign students, they are granted certain priorities. This is why this higher education thing is a little bit of a scam. As I'm saying, the amount of money charged is a scam, and many of the ways in which charges are figured is a scam. And when I say a scam, it's a, you know, in a way, it's a legal grift. So Harris is not out of her league, says Rain. She has made at least 16 trips abroad. Most Americans don't know her VP accomplishments because you have to dig for the info. I do think that the problem with being VP generally is people don't follow what you're doing. Once in a while, you'll get a high-profile position like Mike Pence got the head of the COVID task force, but it wasn't really a task force. It was just a figurehead task force. The actual task force is being run by Jared Kushner, as you know. We've detailed that on this show before. I also think Kamala Harris has been given, you know, all the impossible stuff. Solve the opioid problem in America. Help out with the border problem in America, the southern border. I mean, it's like, dude, you want to give me anything that, you know, I have a shot to make a difference on? She did go to Latin American countries and try to do what is often done, which is with government funding from the U.S., try to relieve the pressure on immigration coming north, but, you know, to whatever end.
Which so most vice presidents don't get tasked with that type of thing. So those were big jobs that she got.
Well, those are big jobs, but as I say, it's kind of like impossible job. It's kind of like if you become vice president, they say, well, we're going to put you in charge of solving the climate crisis. Well, I mean, there are a lot of moving parts to the climate crisis, man. There are a lot of moving parts to immigration. So to put that on her desk, it's almost like you're setting her up to fail. To be fair to Kamala Harris, you really can only make so many inroads. So I think that's a fair point, the point that Rain was just making. And Rich says, Trump 2024, my president. Well, there you and MAGA Mickey. Good luck.
Trump 2024!
Yeah, I don't know.
Why, Rich? He lies. Why would you say that? What are you not thinking clearly?
They all lie. They all lie, Kim. The cult of Trump is real, and it's a cult of personality. And if you haven't seen the RNC, you should watch a few minutes of it. It's remarkable how those who were dug in and anti-Trump have completely come over. Senator J.D. Vance, I mean, his vice presidential nominee is someone who is a never-Trumper who then found God and now has come over to Donald Trump. The one thing I would say about J.D. Vance and Donald Trump that's bad for everyone has nothing to do with women's reproductive rights, has nothing to do with Supreme Court, has nothing to do with even Project 2025. It has to do with monetary policy. So all of you who care about money, and you should, you work hard for your money. You have worked hard for your money. You should care about the fact that both Trump and Vance want what? They want protectionist policies that weaken the dollar. The dollar is strong, and it gives you buying power. If you're going overseas, it gives you buying power. The strength of our dollar speaks to our economy. But when it comes to the value of the dollar, Trump and Vance agree. They want a weaker dollar. Why? Because a weaker dollar would boost American manufacturers. All of a sudden, a weakened dollar could be something that buyers from abroad could then take advantage of. Their currency starts flowing into America to buy American goods. That's the idea. The dollar's been the world dominant currency since World War II. Central banks hold about 60% of their foreign exchange reserves in dollars. We've had a strong dollar policy since the 1990s. The Treasury Secretary at the time was Robert Rubin. And he felt that a strong dollar didn't get in the way of American businesses competing abroad. So it's not clear how Trump would go about weakening the dollar. His Treasury Department could try to sell dollars to buy foreign currency or try to persuade the Federal Reserve just to print more dollars. You could weaken the dollar that way. I mean, it's going to be inflationary for sure. Maybe you want to change that banner to, Trump and, because we don't have a weakened dollar right now. So that, what I'm trying to say is that Trump and J.D. Vance agree. They want a weaker dollar. So the problem is that there could be reverberations across international commerce of all kinds. So you depreciate the dollar. You also increase the tariffs on imports, which is what Trump did and wants to do again. It very likely would reignite inflation, as I say. And there's just no way you can put together these monetary policies and somehow not get an inflationary spiral. I mean, again, the reason you do it, at least the expressed reason you do it, is because exports are more expensive because our dollar is stronger. But the practical considerations are substantial. You start messing around with this, and you may be very sorry. The dollar's status as the reserve currency, which means it's widely held in central banks around the world and accepted for most kinds of transactions, was a subsidy for U.S. consumers, but a tax on American manufacturers, suggests J.D. Vance. I know the strong dollar is sort of the sacred cow of the Washington consensus, J.D. Vance says. But when I survey the American economy and I see our mass consumption of mostly useless imports on the one hand and our hollowed-out industrial base on the other hand, I wonder if the reserve currency status also has some downsides and not just upsides. This is J.D. Vance speaking. He was speaking before Congress. I'm speaking, he's in Congress, so speaking there. This is in a back and forth with Jerome Powell. Mr. Powell responded by noting that the United States benefits from its reserve currency status, makes it possible to buy goods all over the world with dollars. He also said there's not an obvious currency to replace it. The effort on the part of other countries in the Middle East and in China to replace the petrodollar, that's been around for years. I used to talk about this on KGO because it never gets any oxygen. But the fact is, they buy and sell oil in dollars. That gives America a great upper hand. But if you start to mess with that, they're looking for ways to get away from that. Russia wants to get away from it. China wants to get away from it. And they're working hard to try to come up with an alternative. Even the Saudis would like to get away from that. So when you start messing with weakening the dollar, there is a law of unintended consequences which could follow. And you can have prices rising, growth slowing. They call that stagflation. There are all these things that very likely would happen. One thing that wouldn't happen is nothing. So the idea somehow, we'll do it, you won't even notice it. That's absolutely not true.
I'm trying to think about what it looks like on a personal level. All this talk about we're going to the grocery store, we're paying more for things. Well, if our dollar doesn't stretch as far, then we're paying even more than we are now, right?
That's exactly the point. I mean, everything will be more expensive. Yeah. So anything imported will be expensive. And the thing about the world now and the world economy is that it's all linked. There are parts in our American-made cars that come from all over the world. Mm-hmm. So those parts are going to be more expensive with a weaker dollar. So the car will be more expensive. So, again, it's made in America. So great, it's made in America. Yeah, but the stuff that comes in is coming from other parts of the world because now the world is a smaller place and the economies are interlinked in all of these different ways. So I caution against getting too excited about these protectionist policies. They could be a real problem for this country economically.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Tonight, expected to speak at the... You'll tell me when David Katz gets here. I'm losing track of the time a little bit.
Yep, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. Tonight at... okay.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Tonight at the RNC, and I can't get enough of my RNC. The red hats, the little gauze that they wear on their ears. Albert, find me the gauze shots of the people with the, they've made that cool. They've made America wearing gauze. They've made it cool again.
Google it.
Find me a picture of the RNC participants. These are the Trumpers who are wearing those great bandages on their ear. I love it.
It's a show of solidarity,
Damn straight, baby. Trump 2024. You got to love it. I got to love it.
There's never been anything like this.
There really hasn't. Really, really hasn't. So tonight, into that mix of red hats and American flags and bandages on the right ear.
Oh, God.
Comes a longtime supporter of former President Donald Trump. Hulk Hogan, everybody. Hey, brother. Hey, brother. I just want to introduce you to somebody really good, brother. Donald Trump. UFC President Dana White and Hulk Hogan speaking at the RNC. Hogan says, I don't want to be in the ring with any candidates. I want to be Trump's running mate. I want to be his running mate, brother. The Hulkster and Trump's relationship goes back to the 1980s during WrestleMania 4, which was held at, if you guessed, the Trump Plaza Casino and Hotel in Atlantic City. I'm laughing because I feel like everybody in Trump world, even people who end up on his cabinet, are people who are on The Apprentice or people who had events with Trump somewhere. So Trump and Dana White, who runs that UFC, he's the president, will be speaking at the convention. And there they are. There's the Hulkster and Donald Trump. The other speaker, of course, tonight is Donald Trump. And the other thing going on at the convention is very Trumpy. It's the most Trump thing that you can imagine. More Trumpy than the hats, more Trumpy than the fake bandages. The Trumpiest thing that's going on is they are selling tons of merch. Yes. There's never been anything like this merch.
They're selling it.
There's never been anything like this.
Yeah. Donald Trump is selling it. The new white high-top sneakers with a decal of Donald Trump with his fist in the air and blood spattered across his face and the phrase, fight, 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 the words the former president shouted as he was pulled off stage by Secret Service agents during his rally in Pennsylvania just days ago.
So he's financially benefiting from his assassination attempt?
Absolutely, and it's the most American thing ever, Kim. I'm 100% behind it.
Okay.
Yes. If you can't capitalize on your own assassination attempt, then this country is not a place you want to live.
You know, they do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
Every time they try to assassinate me, I can come out with a new sneaker. This one is $299 plus shipping costs. Trump's fans can pre-order, and according to the website, it's a way to, quote, honor his unwavering determination and bravery, and honor it on your feet.
As Dillette says, blah.
Within less than a week, the assassination attempt has brought about a tidal wave of merchandise on demand.
Wow.
Albert, is David Katz here? Is that why you're here, Albert?
Mr. Katz, yeah, Mr. Katz is in
Let
the
me
building.
just finish this out by saying that the shoe launch has come in the midst of the RNC, so you know that there are many visitors who are acquiring as much Donald Trump merch as they possibly can, and these shoes may be the centerpiece of your Donald Trump merch collection. So if you're in the middle of it, run, don't walk to get these sneakers that, again, have the ugliness of a blood-spattered face and the phrase, fight, fight, fight. They have them there on the shoe, memorialized for all time.
Nice.
Indeed.
The Mark Thompson Show.
He is one of the great legal analysts you will ever hear. A favorite across the English-speaking world. You can hear him on British radio, British television. Fox News Channel uses him. They use him in New York. They use him in San Francisco. In Los Angeles, he is a regular guest on media outlets across the world. New Zealand, Australia. So I mention it all because I'm so delighted and proud that he spends time with us every Thursday. How about it for the great former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney, David Katz, everybody.
Great to be with you, Mark.
Hello, sir. I don't hear... Yeah, great to see you, David. And, you know, we spent a lot of time in the last months talking about Donald Trump, and I'm happy to talk about whatever legal cases affect Trump, and I think there's some spillover. I would like to get to, like, for example, the special counsel. But I wonder if we could spend a second on something else that happened, and that is the guilty verdict in that Bob Menendez trial. You know, he was stuffing the gold bars and the cash and the Mercedes in the driveway type thing, and he and his wife were both indicted. He was found guilty. And I wonder if you could speak to that case and if there was anything that stood out about that case to you.
Well, the case of Senator Bob Menendez in federal court, which just resulted in him being found guilty, I think, of all the charges. So that's unanimously by all the jurors. The trial was in New York City. It was kind of interesting, Mark, because it should have been a really high-profile, much-noticed case. But it happened at the same time as the Trump trial was going on in New York City. So one of the funny things was that the motorcade of Trump's went right by the courthouse where Senator Menendez probably happily was getting less attention than he would have otherwise. And then, of course, while the jury arguments were going on, the closing arguments, and while the jury was deliberating, that gets us into the period after the debate, the run-up to the Republican National Convention, the assassination attempt over the weekend, the start of the RNC. So his case actually didn't get the kind of attention that you think that it would have. He's only the seventh senator in United States history to be convicted, only the seventh. One was in the Abscam case that my judge in Washington, D.C. had handled, one of the congressional defendants in that case. There was also a senator named Williams, who, believe it or not, was also from New Jersey, who was found guilty in that case. But only 7 senators in American history. He's the only one to ever be convicted, Menendez, of being a foreign agent. And this is not treason, this is not espionage, but my God, he was found guilty by a jury of being an agent, not for the United States, but an agent for a foreign power, namely Egypt. So it was very significant. He had a wife who was very sick, it turned out, sick enough that the trial was severed. So her trial is going to go later. That gave him the opportunity cynics always say about criminal defense attorneys, that whatever the defense might have been otherwise, if someone else is not there, the other dude did it. Whoever's not in the courtroom, that's who did it. So he did point the finger at his wife and say that she had a bunch of associates. Maybe she was doing something illegal with them. She ran with this dangerous crowd, but he was so in love with her, he turned a blind eye. Love will make you foolish. Even if you're smart enough to be the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the jury didn't buy it. The jury thought that he was in on it, but he had a whole story, right, for the jury, Mark, that the money came from somewhere else. It was the money he kept because he had a complex that he was so worried he was going to get expropriated the way his family supposedly had been in Cuba. He thought that might happen to him, so he better have tens of thousands of dollars of cash at the ready, stashed away, and that the gold bars didn't have to do with him. They had to do with her. But they had a pretty good case on him, Mark, and so he was found guilty. And now you say, okay, what's going to happen now? And it's an interesting situation because the Democrats only have a very small operating margin in the Senate, right? They need Sinema, they need Manchin. They don't get those two. Then I think it's 50-50. They can do something with the vice president. But if he resigned, at least until someone replaces him, if they don't get Sinema and Manchin, they lose every vote, 50-49, without Menendez. The Democratic governor apparently wants to put his wife in that seat for a while. And so I think that one of the things Menendez is going to say, what I would advise him to say if he said to me, I don't want to resign the seat, but I need some talking points. I think one of his talking points is that, look, there's a guy who actually won the primary named Congressman Kim. He should be put in the seat if anyone's going to be put in the seat. But my goodness, the governor's wife tried to get that seat. She failed. Now they're going to vault her into my seat. This is all a political, this is all more, they say I'm the political machinations of New Jersey. This is more political machinations. I'm not resigning. But, they might turn right around and say, okay, they will put Kim in the seat. Or they might say, look, stop with the BS, okay? You were found guilty by the jury. If you don't resign fast, we'll expel you from the Senate. I don't know. They might not make that precedent. So I'm not sure Menendez is really going to go. I think Menendez may hang on for a while. And, to the argument that, well, he's got a right to appeal. Everyone has a right to have their appeal respected. And, in some situations we say, well, my goodness, there hasn't been an appeal. And we get pretty confident the appeal is going to go one way or the other. But I don't see where he has any really good appellate issues. I don't think people like Leader Schumer think he has any great appellate issues. So I think their argument is that you really need to resign right now. And if you don't, they're threatening to expel him.
Now, just to remind everyone, it's a little like president, isn't it? David Katz, you can tell me, just as you can be president, even if you're a felon, you can be a congressperson or senator in this case, even if you're a felon.
Well, I think a lot of the framers really were geniuses, and even geniuses, don't think through all the 19 chess moves ahead. So, no, you can't vote for the president or a senator in many states under many circumstances if you're a felon, but you can vote for a felon for president, and you can vote for a felon for senator. The idea is that if, it's ruled by the people, there's only certain conditions, mainly age, being natural born citizen. And if I'm not sure for a senator, you even need to be a natural born citizen. You do for president. And a period of residency in the United States. So if you meet those senatorial qualifications like the presidential ones, Mark, one of them is not that you not be a felon. And you can say, the people who criticize, let's say, the New York City verdict against Trump, you could say that people could cook up felonies, right? Charge something as a felony just to interfere with elections, just to handicap, right, or hobble their political opponent. And if the people want to vote for him, in fact, that's one of Menendez's arguments. This is not Menendez's first rodeo. He was charged criminally by the Department of Justice in federal court. He had a hung jury, and then the Department of Justice decided not to continue to prosecute him. That was 8 or 9 years ago. And he's been elected to the Senate since he had that baggage. So one of the arguments is they knew they had a guy with a lot of baggage. Yeah, he's got a lot more baggage. But I think he's finally done. I think Menendez is finally done.
I want to move. There are many people are saying, meantime, there are people who are in prison for, so much less than this. But the prison part of it or the sentencing part of it comes in October, I think. And by the way, just because we're on that, David, I've always been wanting to ask you this.
Go ahead.
What is the reason, or maybe the reason is not important, but let me just ask you why the sentencing for, let's say, in the case of Menendez, why is it set for so many months in the future? I always have been struck by sometimes, the judge's sentence has the sentence hearing, just before Christmas. I was like, well, why are we waiting so long?
In the federal courts, there's something called the Probation Act. And so they write a biography about you. You think of some of the famous people who've been through the system, people like Michael Milken. Who's the one who's always on with Snoop Dogg? That's not how she's going to be remembered.
Martha Stewart, yeah.
Martha Stewart. So there have been some people like that, and there's a biography done of all of them. In fact, the financial statements alone that have to be obtained about someone like Michael Milken before he gets sentenced in the federal court. The idea is you want to do a thorough understanding of the defendant. You want to figure out what would be the best placement for the defendant, whether it be high security prison, a minimum security, or under very extenuating circumstances, maybe a halfway house type of setting. Those are always controversial when it's someone rich and the case is about a lot of money. I don't know if you remember, but Martha Stewart ended up actually serving some time in a federal prison camp. And then she spent some time on home detention. And people said home detention has a whole different meaning for Martha Stewart than for somebody else. She had grounds the size of Central Park, right, as part of her home detention. And I've had clients who are on home detention, and one of them told me, wow, this was great. I got a pool table. I could play pool. My friends could come over. I didn't have a curfew. I mean, the curfew was you'd be home by a certain time. But the whole idea that it's a big lollipop to serve this federal time, it's not a big lollipop, although we have to talk about the fact that Peter Navarro woke up in federal prison and that evening spoke to the Republican National Convention. That was just yesterday. Woke up in federal prison in Miami. And then when he said how awful federal prison was, and it's terrible, you're separated from your family, from other people, you don't have liberty, you have to follow the orders, maybe you have some dangerous people there with you. Although Michael Milken said that the worst thing about serving time was that everybody pounded him for investment advice all day long and told him schemes that they wanted Milken to invest in. It was apparently nonstop being huckstered by the other white-collar inmates. But anyway, it's not a pleasant circumstance. But I think in response to Peter Navarro saying how terrible his white-collar prison was, and like I said, it's no picnic, but they said you could get butter pecan ice cream at the commissary.
Albert, find me a picture of Peter Navarro speaking to the RNC last night. I noticed it too. I couldn't listen to it because I was on the air in Los Angeles, but I saw it, and his image it makes me crazy because he is such an unapologetic, lawless guy. I mean, his plans for overturning the election, he was sharing on MSNBC. The denial of the legitimacy, and this is our plan. And there he was. He's just a fire-breathing dragon. And there he was last night.
He introduced his fiancée, and he said something like, "She served the time with me," which I don't think he went to a coeducational federal prison. I assume he meant that she came at the visiting time and visited him.
Yeah, I took it metaphorically, which is sort of like, when I was on ice and in a way put us on ice, but she stayed with me. She waited. It was hardly like a 9-year sentence where she had to wait until he gets done to get out. It was a 90-day sentence.
Well, Mark, this is the world that I've lived in as a white-collar criminal defense attorney. I've seen it all. Somebody out in the desert serving time, and I went out there to handle his appeal. And he was very jittery talking about his appeal. And I kept saying, well, I've got this issue. And I tried to explain. He says, no, I hired you because you're so good. I got it covered. I got it covered. You got it covered. And we went through kind of quickly. And then I said, are you in a hurry? He said, well, yes, if I don't get down to the softball field, I'm not one of the 9 who gets to play. And so you could joke about that part of it. But then I went there another time to see him and his wife, her stand by your man woman, if ever there was one. And she drove their old jalopy out there past Mojave to the desert and came to visit him every single weekend, stood by her man. And,
she didn't just come out to see him play softball?
Some divorce attorney said to me, you have such a good practice, Mr. Katz. Why don't you ever send me any divorce business. I said, my guys don't get divorced, especially if the spouse perceives that what they were doing for the family, not to spend on another woman, right? That's what I've seen. That's what I've seen for years as a criminal defense attorney, this kind of stand by your man attitude. But it was quite a rogues gallery at the RNC. I just glanced at it, but I saw Manafort. And when I saw Manafort, I said, I'm gonna completely lose my mind. Manafort's somebody, because he got his pardon.
It was a pardon fest.
They were all there. It looked like club fed, right? It looked like prison camp fed, kind of transferred over to the RNC in Milwaukee. By the way, I'm in Milwaukee a lot because my wife is from Wisconsin. So I'm arriving in that airport. And Milwaukee's a lovely city. It has a beautiful art museum, if anyone's in Milwaukee, and a beautiful lakefront.
This is not the week to be there. The security.
But I was just to say, this is not the week to be there.
I want to move on to something else, which is the special counsel situation, because Judge Cannon, who was the handpicked Trump judge in Florida handling the document case, she went against decades of precedent by higher courts, suggesting that in her ruling that the appointment of Jack Smith as special counsel was illegitimate. And she threw out the indictment of Trump in that classified documents case. And first you can speak, I think you've touched on it, but you can speak to the appeal possibilities, et cetera. But I want to really address the broader issue of special counsels. And I want to get to Hunter Biden, who was also prosecuted by a special counsel. So if this special counsel illegitimacy, which was first really hinted at by Clarence Thomas in a gratuitous reference that he made in his court opinion, if this is really upheld, then Hunter Biden could, I would think, get off the hook because his special counsel falls into the same category.
Well, he could. Where to start? Cannon's 93-page, I think it was, opinion is not worth the paper it's printed on. It's not worth any of the 93 pages that she wrote. One of the things that, and we've talked about this ad infinitum, but ad nauseum, maybe for some people, with the special prosecutor, Jack Smith, having filed in the Southern District of Florida, he not only took 1 in 3 chances of getting Cannon, but another thing I don't think that he'd really thought through, he and his team, was that there was not precedent upholding the special prosecutor law in that circuit. The 11th Circuit down there is not the D.C. Circuit. So many of these cases have been decided in the D.C. Circuit. So this sounds a little inside baseball, but it's really important for people to understand. There's a U.S. Supreme Court case which involves Special Prosecutor Jaworski, who prosecuted Nixon. He was not the Attorney General. He was someone who was picked as the special prosecutor. One of the issues in the case was him as special prosecutor and wanting to get records and taking other actions against Nixon. And the U.S. Supreme Court said unanimously in a decision written by Chief Justice Berger, who was appointed by Nixon or chosen by Nixon, unanimously they said there was no problem with the special prosecutor. That's why people are just sort of, they're just amazed again by this Cannon ruling. Now, since then, the people have argued, well, it was just dictum in that case. It wasn't the real crucial issue in the case. Dictum is from Latin, something that is said. So the idea is that if a decision says, okay, this is very much like the situation where this court does X, and now a case comes up that involves X, and they say, well, that previous case was precedent because they said this is like where we do X. The idea was that this is like where we do X was not central to deciding the previous case. It was just something that was said. It was like a rumination or a reflection by the court that wasn't necessary to the decision. And so people in these later cases have argued it wasn't really necessary to the decision in that Jaworski and President Nixon case. And the D.C. Circuit has said, oh, yes, it was. So if it had been in the D.C. District Court, that trial judge would have had to follow not just the U.S. Supreme Court, but would have had to follow the D.C. Circuit, where the D.C. Circuit said a lot of people are running around arguing in some of these cases, like in the Lawrence Walsh prosecution. He was the one who went after Iran-Contra in the 80s regarding Reagan. It came up in that case. And yes, somebody came in like Trump did and argued it's just dictum. And guess what? We shot that down. So she would have been bound if she'd have been in the D.C. District Court. But she could write on a fairly open slate, she thought. And she could do something different from what the D.C. Circuit, a higher court, she couldn't have defied the higher court, the D.C. Circuit, even if she had that opinion about the U.S. Supreme Court. So that is why that when this case gets to the 11th Circuit, even if the 11th Circuit doesn't back up what the D.C. Circuit did, this case does go to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, people say, well, look, after Dobbs, they don't follow any precedent. After the crazy thing they did in the Trump case just this term with presidential immunity, they carry water for Trump no matter where it takes them. But I don't believe that. I believe that this is so clear that there is the authorization in these statutes to appoint a special prosecutor, that the appointments of all the special prosecutors are fine, and that she'll be reversed. And then the question, which is be very interesting, two questions. Number one, how fast will that happen? It can't happen in a week or two. And then will the U.S. Supreme Court take it and delay it like they did presidential immunity way into next year? That's a possibility. That is a possibility, especially if the 11th Circuit disagrees with the D.C. Circuit. I don't think they will. But the other thing which is interesting is, will they ask upon reversal, which I think is pretty inevitable in this case, that ultimately the federal courts will reverse canon on this. Will they say that now they should pick a new judge as part of the remedy, that when they send the case back, as I think they will, and tell her, no, you got this wrong, the special prosecutor can prosecute this case in the Southern District of Florida, will they send the case back to her? And the hard part for Jack Smith is, what's the expression? If you go for the king, don't just wound him. If you go for the federal judge who's overseeing your case and say that she's biased and can't give us a fair trial, don't lose that argument in the higher courts and land right back in front of her. People think that no matter how federal judges are supposed to be completely unemotional, that you might run the risk of someone being emotional. You said you should ding her off the case. She's totally unfair and biased. And then you end up, oh, hello, is it Justice Cannon? No. I mean, we're still calling you Judge Cannon. Judge Cannon, hi, we're back here. You were wrong on the decision, but we're back here, because she's already made menacing sounds toward Jack Smith.
Well, she cited Thomas's opinion 3 times in knocking out Jack Smith. And
let me say this really quick. That was just a concurring opinion. Nobody joined Thomas. Thomas
That's right.
was all
That's
out
right.
by himself saying, I agree with these folks on presidential immunity. And let me say, an additional reason why I do is because I don't think that the special prosecutor should be looked at. I think there are real issues, notwithstanding what the court unanimously held in Nixon. But nobody joined him. Not Alito, not anybody else joined that. So the idea that he gave her some rope, he only gave her rope because she wanted to find that rope. But, you and I have talked about the fact that that case is kind of going nowhere before the time that matters. It's going nowhere except now banging around the appellate courts.
Let me ask you a legal question related to the venue.
Before the election. It's going nowhere before the election. I'm sorry. I want to get that
no, I understand. The delay was deliberate for that reason. Could you, as a special counsel, pull the case from that court jurisdiction and actually move it to Washington?
Well, one of the interesting things, and I don't think Merrick Garland wants to do this, okay? Merrick Garland, I haven't researched it, in detail. But I wondered when I read the decision if Merrick Garland could have just said, look, we're appealing that. We think you're wrong. But let's assume for a second that you're right and there is no special prosecutor who can handle this. I can handle this. I'm the attorney general, okay? And so I am going to bring these charges, and I'm going to bring them in Washington, D.C. So Merrick Garland and his staff will bring these charges. And now the courts they would appeal that, and they would say, well, that's a violation of the special prosecutor law. But you think one of them must be right. If there's no valid special prosecutor law, that doesn't mean that the crime can't be prosecuted. It means that the delegation is improper, that the inferior officer, which is what Jack Smith is under the law, he's an inferior officer, that you cannot give that much power or delegate to an inferior officer, which means, okay, it goes to the superior officer, Who's the superior officer? The Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland. Was he approved by the Senate? Yes, he was confirmed by the Senate. Now, to answer your question about Hunter Biden's an unusual situation because one of the arguments is that whoever's going to be the special prosecutor has to be confirmed by the Senate. And they take a lot of people from outside government, Mark, and make them the special prosecutor. This Jack Smith was from outside government. At the time he was picked, Mueller was from outside government. And that's actually been the norm. It makes it look more independent, more like the administration's not doing it to either favor a friend or to railroad a foe, to have this independent person from outside the government. But then you have the situation where they haven't been confirmed by the Senate. The interesting thing about this U.S. attorney in Maryland was he was confirmed by the Senate. He was simply kept on by Biden after being confirmed by the Senate. So that would present a different legal.
Yeah, he falls into a different category then, you're saying, yeah.
Maybe. And then his authority was he was made from being the U.S. attorney to being special counsel. So I suppose the remedy there might be you would carve out what he did as special counsel. You would say, okay, the actions that he took as U.S. attorney, they were fine if the reason for having questions about that law was the person hadn't been Senate confirmed. He not only was Senate confirmed, but he was still in the job for which the Senate confirmed him, U.S. attorney for the District of Delaware. That would be, at the end of the day, if Biden withdraws and another candidate takes up the Democratic mantle for president, or if whatever happens then or whatever happens in November, the speed at which the Republicans will lose interest in Hunter Biden will shock you, because no one ever cared about Hunter Biden except as a way to try to flog his father, right?
Yeah, it's true. The laptop is mentioned prominently at the RNC, but you're right. If Biden is no longer politically relevant, then Hunter is no longer politically relevant either. And I'll just remind everybody, and because I thought it was absolutely genius the way you explained it when you did, that David Katz, as Katzadamus in his prediction mode, predicts that there is every bit of indication that Hunter Biden will get the pardon. There's just, as I recall, you laid it out so well. Like, that would be everything that Hunter's done, all of the moves they've made illegally, everything would suggest that he believes that in the end there'll be a pardon. And it makes total sense that he would be pardoned, right?
Just as I think Trump would pardon one of his kids if the shoe were on the other foot. I think with the the power to do that, and I don't think that the country would chastise it. I think that they would think a loving father, really, what's he going to do? And it's not like he murdered somebody. It's not like he is still on drugs. He's apparently clean and sober. We had that celebration for the J.D. Vance. First he trashes his mom, I guess, in the book. Then he trashes her on the stage. Then he says, oh, there she is. There she is. 10 years clean and sober. Well, how about the fact that Hunter's been clean and sober for quite a few years too? If we want to really make a difference between people who still have that problem and people who've gotten themselves clean and sober, that describes not only J.D. Vance's mom, if it's true, but it certainly describes Hunter Biden, who everyone agrees has been clean and sober for several years, quite a few years now.
The politics of it are simple. If Biden were to win, let's just leave aside all the controversy, but if he were to win, then you pay no political price for pardoning your son. If you're to lose, then you pay no political price for pardoning your son, because you're no longer going to be president within a couple of months, and so you may as well just pardon him. So and then you add to that the stuff that David was talking about, which is a parent and a child who's now cleaned up his life. I want to ask you quickly
real quick, Mark. One case is about a gun that Hunter never used in any improper, bad way, and it was discarded 2 weeks later. The other case is about income tax, which, in defense of the pardon, I'm sure it would be stated that all the money was repaid. Now, not everybody has a financial angel like Hunter Biden did, who repaid all the money. But the reality is it's an unusual federal income tax case where all the money, including interest and penalties, was paid to the IRS.
I want to quickly, before we wrap up, ask you about something that is huge, and it relates to the Justice Department and the January 6th obstruction charges. and the retooling of plea deals for rioters after the Supreme Court ruling. So the Supreme Court narrowed how the Justice Department can pursue obstruction charges against January 6 rioters. Federal prosecutors now are beginning to offer retooled plea deals or dropping that specific charge against members of the mob that attacked the U.S. Capitol. Remember, just to remind everybody, the justices essentially really narrowed what obstruction is. So without getting too much into the weeds, because of that, the Justice Department is reorganizing the plea deals that they are offering to, the alleged members of the Proud Boys and others who are involved in J6. Can you speak about this? Because it's a lot of people involved.
Well, this statute was passed after the Enron fiasco, and it had to do with people who destroyed records. They could be digital records or they could be paper records. So the paradigm was somebody calls you up and says, oh my God, the feds are coming in. They're going to grab all the accounting records, and you push delete. You've now destroyed those records. You've obstructed justice by destroying those digital records. Or the old style thing where, as soon as Elliot Ness and the Untouchables were about to smash down the door, all of the records of liquor transactions were on flash paper, and all the flash paper would go up in a fire. Those were the paradigms. And so the question was, did those marauders at the Capitol, with all the awful things that they had done, Mark, were they about destroying papers? Were they about destroying records? Some of them were. Trump himself seems to have been about that. And that's why those charges against Trump may stand, because they wanted to destroy those physical certifications. Maybe they were going to grab those boxes and burn them or do something, hide them, take them out of there. And that certainly would have been the Enron conduct. But the people who just marauded and screamed and waved Confederate flags and stuff like that, well, as fate would have it, the guy who waved the Confederate flag, that we've all seen that person, the Confederate flag waving, he was apparently only convicted or only charged with this obstruction statute. But the statute of limitations has not run, so they'll find something else to charge him with, Mark. And many of them, they'll find something else to charge them with. So they'll say to some of them, look, you've already agreed to a 2-year sentence, and it's going to be made up by the obstruction, and it's going to be made up by some other charges which are not in any jeopardy after that Supreme Court decision. So let's say you were going to get 24 months. Your attorney's a genius. The system is favoring you. And so 21 months, here's your big chance. You get the benefit of the Supreme Court decision. We're going to take out the obstruction. We're going to give you 21 months. You used to be willing to take 24 months. The guy will take 21 months. That's great. The guy who that's all he's charged with, if he won't take a deal, that guy may go to trial. He may get charged with something else. So they think there's only, I think, dozens of people who are actually affected by this. The newspaper said there were something like 250 of these marauders, of these trespassers who have that charge against them. So that's the bottom line, is that charge is no good as a standalone charge. If that's all they have, the Department of Justice is in trouble against that defendant, unless they can prove that that person really did intend to destroy some records, like they were going to try to destroy the certifications. If they just wanted to, pee on someone's desk and scream and yell, and that's really all that they have, the obstruction wouldn't fit.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, only 17 people, less than 2% of the roughly 1,400 Capitol riot defendants who were convicted of the obstruction charge and weren't convicted of other felonies. Defendants already convicted of the charge, just noticing here, the Justice Department says that 130 people have been convicted and sentenced for obstructing an official proceeding, though more than half of those people were also convicted of additional felonies. So even if you carve out that, there are additional felonies involved.
And there may be some, Mark, their lawyers didn't raise it. And this is why you have to be very diligent when you're a criminal defense attorney. And sometimes you have to make a record and you have to say, Your Honor, we're challenging this. And the judge may say, yeah, you're wasting a lot of time. Okay, but no, Your Honor, I need to put this on the record. You're always seeing that with defense lawyers. You're seeing that in lawyer shows. And no, I need to put this on the record. And one of the reasons is because what you don't complain about in the trial court, you can't appeal that you didn't get the ruling in the appellate court. You have to preserve your objection. You have to make your record in the trial court. So there may be some people who didn't see this issue, didn't make it. They may argue that their attorneys were ineffective by not seeing it. I don't know. I don't think that's a winner because the Department of Justice officials didn't see it, right? They put all their eggs in this basket for some of the defendants, not many, but in some instances, I think they did put their eggs in the basket. There'll be a few people who probably will get a quote windfall, but they've been dragged through the. It depends how you look at them. So you can look at them as some of them were sort of dragged through the system. They were overzealous. Some of them, were an army that was willing to stage a coup, and they were underpunished, really, given what they were willing to do. They were willing to, basically to have a coup and dress in military fatigues and push those, the way that they treated those police officers there, how many they injured, several were killed. Let's never minimize how violent some of them were and how close they came, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, it really did almost work. It really did almost work.
Vance said he would not sign. Vance says, I would have sent it back to the states. Vance said, I would have sent it back to the states, which if you really think that our democracy is at stake, if you really think that, 4 years ago, 4.5 years from now, if Trump and Vance are in office and a Democrat wins, they won't count the votes. That certainly concentrates my thinking about what the Democrats ought to win now. Like maybe they should have a stop Trump team that I haven't heard this from a lot of people that maybe they agree to serve only one term, the president and vice president. And then you can have Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom duke it out in 4.5 years, but somehow stop Trump. If you really believe our democracy is at stake, if you really believe they won't count the vote fairly in 4.5 years, what's the point of being the nominee in 4.5 years if you're Newsom or Harris? If you really believe that this is the end of democracy, if Trump and Vance get in there and they won't count the votes, let's win now. Let's not wait 4.5 years and think they're going to count the vote fairly then.
And people are asking, I guess, what your it's interesting. You just shared some thoughts on the election, and I think that pretty much covers it. I know that there's a lot going on today. There's a push on the part of the former president, Obama, to speak to Biden and suggest that, he read these tea leaves. But I don't know if that's going to be sufficient. Meantime,
I read, Mark, I read that there are 4 candidates who poll 5 points better than Kamala Harris. I don't know if that's true. I'm not a pollster.
I did that story right before you came on, actually, last hour. And,
but if that's true, Mark, if that's true that there are 4 candidates who poll 5 points better against Trump and Vance, I think you've got to concentrate your mind, right, and just think, how much is it worth to win? How much is it worth to put out a ticket that polls 5 points better? Now, they may not poll 5 points better in a month,
right.
But, in it to win it. In it to win it. If you really believe Trump and Vance are what a lot of people think that they are, this huge threat to democracy, to the environment, to stacking the Supreme Court even more, getting Thomas to quit and put Cannon on there or somebody like that. Sotomayor's health may not be that great. If you think that those are the stakes, the environment, our justice system, the rule of law, corruption, like everywhere, not counting the vote, if the Democrats would prevail next time, then put somebody in there right now. Put the 2 people who are going to run the best and then fight it all out in 4 years, Newsom and Kamala Harris. I'd love to see it. Have these 2 just serve for 1 term. Make them make a commitment. We're here to stop Trump, and that's all we're here for. We're patriots. They talk about this guy, Mark Kelly. I think he's an astronaut. I don't know a lot about him.
He leads the pack.
Whitmer.
Yeah, he leads the pack. So,
okay, Mark.
Yeah, I don't know. I love his name. I met him once.
I'm going back to just legal commentary, but
okay,
my God, it's been
that's
such
it.
a
We'll
week.
let you go with your legal commentary.
I don't live on an island. I don't live on a legal island, Kim. Right? We don't live on an island. It's just legal cases.
I don't know how up you are on campaign law, but is it true that all the monies donated to the Biden-Harris campaign can't be rolled back to the DNC and put toward another candidate? Is that the way you understand it?
I read something that it legally can be transferred as long as it's done properly by lawyers who know what they're doing. So you can take it from this and you can put it into a PAC, and the PAC can have certain objectives. I think the reality is that you can use the money for those purposes. Trump puts half the money in his pocket or gives it to lawyers. I mean, don't do something like that. Do something that's legal. But I think there are legal ways. But it seems like some of the major donors don't want to even take those chances. They want to keep the money in their pocket until they see somebody who polls well and who can beat Trump and Vance. And why shouldn't they feel that way? They're in it to win it.
Yeah. All right. I will. Yeah, it will take lawyers, but they can jackhammer that money out. But it'll take lawyers to do it. And he's my favorite lawyer. You're looking at him right now, David Katz, legal analyst, former federal prosecutor, now the defense attorney. Whose prediction, Trevor Starr in Hollywood, do you trust more, Katz or Mr. Predicto? Well, Katz is my guy, but I mean, Mr. Predicto is our latest. And Mr. Predicto, we can ask, will there be a change top of ticket for the Democrats?
It is a strong possibility.
It's a strong possibility. So that's Mr. Predicto.
Mark,
But again,
this is like when they made the grandmasters of chess play against, what was it, Watson, and IBM computer would beat them. I have to go up against. I got every single U.S. Supreme Court decision right that we talked about last term, and now I got to go up against Mr. Predicto. I'll take any competition. I don't shy from the competition, even with your machine, Mark.
I love it. That's our guy, David Katz. Everybody, thanks, David. Bye, my friend. Too good. Too good. Too good.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Great, I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Yeah, right on, everybody. Thank you to our Patreon and PayPal supporters. That's how we stay on the air every day. We are a live show. We come to you live every day. That is our commitment. We've done a lot of things to indicate to you that we are here for you, and we will always be here for you. And you have done a lot for us also through Patreon and PayPal. If you haven't joined our Patreon and PayPal communities, please consider it. There are links to Patreon and PayPal under all our videos. You can click on the link. It'll take you right to Patreon and PayPal, and you can enter any amount that helps us. If you can part with something on a monthly basis, it helps us make payroll every month. So, yeah, we're on YouTube, and yes, we get YouTube revenue from the roll-in ads, etc., but that revenue really isn't enough to sustain this show. Honestly, without you, we go away. So thank you, all of you who are already on board, and those who yes, thank you. A big shout out to all of you, and I look forward to more and more people jumping on board and becoming part of our Patreon and PayPal community. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I've got a lot in the way of comments I just want to quickly touch base on.
I have a story for you, too.
Oh, you do? Go ahead. You first, then.
It's not a breaking story. It's just something I can't resist throwing at you. So I was reading this Newsweek article about whether or not and when an announcement should be made regarding President Joe Biden and whether he'll withdraw from the race.
Oh, I saw this too just now.
New article indicates that he's being urged to steal Donald Trump's big moment. And this is according to Meghan McCain, of course, John McCain's daughter. She posts on X, if the Democrats still have any fight left in them, they would announce Biden stepping down during the middle of Trump's speech at the RNC tonight.
I am here to tell all of you,
my view, and that's a Meghan McCain. Yeah. I'm Meghan McCain, co-host of The View. Right? Is it?
I am here to tell all of you, my wonderful co-hosts, and the viewers at home that this is going to be my last season here at The View.
That's right. Gosh, that brings me back to an emotional moment when I found out about Meghan McCain leaving The View. Anyway, so that's an interesting idea that if you're going to do it at the same time that Trump is on stage, and it'll steal the spotlight. They'll have that breaking news thing, right? Like,
I don't think it would derail him. I think they'd tell him in his ear, Biden is stepping away from the race, and he would say, I've just heard that, Sleepy Joe is out. And it would be, I think he would get to break the news to the nation. I don't know.
No. You think it might backfire?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. I don't know. But I think those are things that... Yeah, I don't know, but I love that it is an inventive idea, kind of trolling in a way, I also wanted to mention that Trump has done pretty well in some of these progressive. There's a think tank called Data for Progress that found that Trump's criminal charges are no longer prominent in people's minds. Only 37% of swing voters said they were more concerned about Trump's legal issues than they were concerned about President Joe Biden's age and health.
Of course, because we're always focused on the headline, right?
Yeah, that's an 11% drop from before the debate. So the debate sort of refocused everybody that way. So that's good news for Trump. I did have I wanted to say Louise Harris, Taylor Swift in 2024 is what I'm saying. Louise with
Swift doesn't lose at anything. That's right.
Yeah, big shout out. Taylor doesn't lose at anything is true. That's a very good thought. Hey, what about Debbie? How about is that a $2 super sticker or $25? Sounds like she wanted to make it $25. But it's $2. Is that right, Producer Albert? Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Big shout out. And at the $25 is suggesting that you're going to be stepping up and giving us another $23, then I give it another big shout out. Yeah.
We're grateful for
she
anything.
set the bar high. She only met the low one, like me.
Yeah.
So
right. But we still love you, Debbie. That's great.
Love you, Debbie.
But you've tantalized us with the $25 suggestion, so that's where we're focused on. Harris is viewed positively by 18 countries surveyed by Pew Research Center this spring, says Rain. So back off of her, Harris, she's saying. It's political suicide, says Linda, to switch up at the 11th hour. Polls are useless at this point. From what I see, voters are backing Biden and Harris to stop Trump. All this speculation is crazy talk. Well,
that's pure speculation.
Yeah.
Speaking of speculation, how about Oprah Swift?
Oprah Swift. Well, I mean...
who is having that conversation?
Well, we're having it now. The American people don't know Mark Kelly at all, Mark, says Think It Through. I agree. I think one of the problems is that Mark Kelly, fill in the blank, even Whitmer. I mean, I don't know who... You need to do a rapid education program on whoever you choose. But they know Mark Kelly sufficiently enough to respond on a survey that they'd rather see Mark Kelly by 5 percentage points. They'd rather see him than Kamala Harris. So I don't know when you say they don't know him. I mean, people on the survey at least knew him. But I take your point. I've just said that I take your point and accept your point. I don't think he's well known. Trump is going to legally challenge any of this nonsense, and it will all be tied up in courts. Stop this mad talk, says Linda. For God's sakes, man, stop this mad talk. Trump and MAGA want Biden to stay in, says Jan. I think that's absolutely right. That's the candidate they want to run against. Yeah. But, I love Oprah, but not as a presidential candidate. I prefer experienced politicians, says Sandy. Well, I mean, the guy who's about to get in, Donald Trump, had no experience prior to getting in. I mean, sadly, his administration reflected it. He hired a bunch of other people who had no experience. And essentially, the country was being run by people who had no experience. Yeah. They were either conspiracy theorists, completely corrupt. I'm talking about the Paul Manaforts, the Mike Flynns of the world, the Steve Bannons of the world, this Stephen Millers of the world. Or they were complete neophytes like Jared Kushner with top secret clearance. His kids, who will be back in, right? Eric and Don Jr. and Ivanka. These are the people who are running the U.S. government the last time around. I get it. There were other people around, but the people who were closest to the president were those that I just mentioned. So, you know, I've said this before, and I'll just reiterate it in relation to the Oprah thing. The Oprah thing's not going to happen, so it doesn't matter. But just in relation to people who don't have experience that way, but somehow are vaulted into a position of power, or at least scoring position for a position of power because of their name recognition or their perception as a personality, as someone responsible and someone who might be able to make a difference in the country. If they are diligent, studied, and surround themselves with others who have experience, then they're miles ahead of that last guy who was in, Donald Trump. He was all bravado. I know everything. I don't need to be briefed. Let me tell you what we're going to do. And he was completely one-dimensional. So, again, probably a bunch of the people from our chat or the people who watch this show or listen to this show would be better chief executives than Donald Trump because they would listen to advisors and make an effort to read briefing materials and get up to speed on what's going on. So I'm for people who make an earnest effort to make educated decisions and responsible decisions and have a sense for the gravity of the office. It doesn't matter, says Luis. Big shout out. Luis may be our number one super chatter. Luis says, it doesn't matter who runs on the Dems side. We all would vote for one of Mark's cats if they were the candidate. It's true. This is kind of a waste of time. Well, but let me just say last thing on that. There is a sense that, again, and I made this point in the first hour, and I'll make it very briefly right now. There's a sense among the Democrats, or it doesn't matter. I mean, Biden, Harris, people are so afraid of what's going to happen with Donald Trump that it almost doesn't matter. There'll be so much of a negative vote, a non-Trump, a stop-Trump vote, that Trump will essentially drown himself. Trump will he'll fall off the cliff on his own. You don't need to push him. And what I would suggest is don't count on that. Don't count on that. You need to find a candidate that people are anxious to vote for, because that vote and the enthusiasm associated with that vote not only affects top of ticket, but it affects congressional races, senatorial races. It affects down ballot candidates as well. You need to find top of ticket people that voters want to vote for, to get off the couch and vote for.
Well, it seems like in the last election, a lot of people were motivated by the hate of Trump. And maybe that's what we have to use to leverage people off the couch again, is motivation by intense dislike.
Yeah, but you're making the point that I just refuted, which is that maybe that's enough to carry it, but I'm saying don't count on that, because if you can get tremendous voter turnout of the sort that we had when Biden and Trump went against each other the last time, if you can get tremendous voter turnout, then the Democrats will likely win. If there's big turnout, Democrats usually carry the day. But you're not going to get big turnout this time, I'd suggest. And the reason for that is because there is almost, if it's not an apathy, it's something close to apathy associated with, Biden is old, Trump is old, Trump's a fascist, Biden seems in and out, and blah, 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 what's on TV?
Yep.
I mean, that really is the America we live in. So the reason you had big turnout the last time is people were living the Trump nightmare. They were in the middle of the COVID Trump nightmare. Denial of COVID, all these kinds of science denials going on at the same time we're trying to work our way out of the pandemic. There was corruption around the COVID-19 task force, payoffs, the Trump wall was built by all of these people who were major donors to Trump, most of whom had nothing to do with building walls ever before. They were just pocketing tens of millions of dollars. We were living that corruption. Now, again, it's sort of a faded memory. And it's not that people want Trump. It's that they just want to see what's on Netflix and they miss voting day. I meant to vote. I got busy. The kids, I'm just saying. There's a lot going on, but don't count on the negative Trump vote to carry you to the finish line. It might, but I'm saying it's a lot to try to count on. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I don't know what I have to do, Albert. I feel like we're about done. Am I wrong?
We're all caught up.
Are we? Kim, did you have any loose ends that you wanted to share with us?
Kim, how are you?
No, I feel good about the show today.
Yeah? Well, I hope you'll share those opinions on your after-party live show, which basically discusses in part...
We'll do it live. I'll write it, and we'll do it live.
You discuss this show, and you also discuss Nikki's show. Yeah, I've watched it. Yeah, it's good. Sometimes I tune in, Albert, to see if she talks any trash about me. You know how Kim is. She can be a little behind your back. Yeah.
What?
So I like to tune just to make sure.
I blame you.
All right, I'm just saying.
Oh, you know what? I do have some breaking news. I hate to end this show on a sad note.
What?
I hate to be Brett about it,
Yeah.
but
I saw this on Twitter, and I didn't mention it. Yeah.
Bob Newhart has passed away at the age
What?
of 94. Yeah.
Oh, I love Bob Newhart. I really love Bob Newhart.
Yeah, he died in Los Angeles this morning after a series of short illnesses, and it is being called the end of an era in comedy. Bob Newhart was 94.
He was brilliant. We had his albums in my house. His various albums were just terrific. There he is in Elf.
Yeah.
Of course, the Bob Newhart show, both Bob Newhart shows were insanely popular. What a brilliant guy. He did something very funny at the funeral of Tim Conway, and I will share that with you tomorrow, but that is sad news. So, all right. Thanks,
I'm
everybody.
Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show.
Thank you, Shadow.
Bye-bye.
Kim's going over to After Party.
Bye-bye.
Tomorrow is our Friday show, Florida and more. Until then, bye-bye.